Welcome back. Thursday night preview. We might actually have a good game tonight. We may actually have a good game.
Compared to the last few, I mean, that's a very low bar to set. Right. We might actually get a touchdown in tonight's game.
I mean, it's only 2-4 teams.
Yeah.
There's some sort of offense here. The Saints are traveling to Arizona. Both teams, 13th and 14th in offensive yards right now in the league. I'll take that over 28th and 29th, like the last 2 weeks, it seems like, right? So
definitely. Yeah, I do think points are going to be on the board. Well, it's going to be more exciting and fun to watch than the last few Thursday night games. Even though, I think there still is a lot at stake in this game, right? For one of these teams, if you lose, you're looking down your season as like over, basically. It's tough to say that this early in the season, but when you look at the divisions these teams are in and the competition of those divisions, all the teams are close. And if you lose another game, you're backing yourself into a corner.
Right. It seems very disappointing, right? I think the Cardinals kind of had expectations this year after going 7-0 last season. You fell apart at the end, and that's kind of the storyline. But I think with the offseason, everyone kind of expected them to do okay. 2-4, I don't think is okay. That's bad. Now, the same thing with the Saints. A lot of turnover, but there's a lot of pieces here, right? We talked about how good their defense is on paper. Michael Thomas back. They bring in Jarvis Landry. I mean, these are pieces to go with Kamara. You can win with this, right? And really, we thought they'd go as far as Jameis Winston would take them. Currently, he's not even really playing. So I'll get into more on that later. Don't know who's going to play this game, right? But I think the big storyline in this game is we might see DeAndre Hopkins return, right? Suspended 6 games. Those 6 games have passed. PEDs, right? I'm not really sure on the details of what PEDs. That world is a whole different thing. We might have to bring in a consultant.
Well, you know what they all say. It's a mistake, and I did this, and I didn't know what I was doing when it was. Shut the hell up. I hate those excuses. We talked about that in the preseason as well. He did cheat, and he got caught, and that's why he was suspended, okay? So no 2 ways around, I didn't know what my trainer was giving me in my milkshake. Yeah, sure, buddy. You and everybody else.
Yeah, I think that world is complex. You got to be on top of it, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're smart enough to know. You have to know every single thing that's in there. And if not, then you've got a bad trainer and you should fire them.
But it's especially like certain players get tested more often than others. So that's just a really bizarre world. But if you're trying to be the best, like DeAndre Hopkins is, right? He's always been in the conversation to be
absolutely
top guy. I think that level you gotta really pay attention, and you gotta be on your game all the time when it comes to training, what you're putting in your body, food, and also like performance enhancing things. Like there's certain things out there that are legal that will give you a boost, right? And I think it's a very fine line between what's legal and what's not legal. So I think that is more difficult than it seems on the surface. But what do I know? I've never taken a PED in my whole life.
I mean, I think that's you're right that there is a fine line on what's legal and what isn't, and it's changing. But these NFL players know it, and so I'm not making any excuses for them. But when we talk football, the fact of the matter is still the same, that he's one of the best, if not one of the top couple wide receivers in the NFL. And so that's a huge piece to have back. He's going to be playing in this game, but you have to take into account that with the 6-week suspension, he's not able to practice with the team or be at the team facility for those 6 weeks, which means he just came back on Monday, right? There's 3 practices and then a game. Now he's been with the team for long enough that I'm sure he knows the playbook and all of that. And he has some chemistry with Kyler Murray, but they haven't seen each other in 6 weeks.
Right.
So I don't know how much he's going
longer than that. Last season, he missed the last 4 games. Last time he played was week 13 last season. And then he only played 2 games during that period, week 12, week 13. Before that, he missed 3 games. So really, not a lot of chemistry since,
it's been a
week
bit.
8 of last year is really what we're talking here.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of questions here. I don't think he's going to be playing every snap, to say the least. But maybe 3/4, half of them, and he'll still make a difference. I mean, we saw how much this offense struggled without him out there. Kyler Murray, just not the same without that viable number one big target weapon who you can just haul it, heave it up to, and know that he's going to catch it half the time at least. So yeah, I mean, Hopkins is definitely an X factor returning to this game. Lots of questions around what will his productivity be? How much will he change this offense? Because last week the Cardinals look the most stagnant they could be against an inferior Seahawks team. Defensively, sure, but offensively against the worst defense in the NFL, they couldn't do anything. So does Hopkins make that much of a difference? I mean, he's not changing the offensive line. He's not changing the run game. So I'm not sure what kind of effect he'll have. It's obviously a positive one that he's back and that, him and Kyler Murray can get their thing going. I think that's more of a long-term plus as well, right? They're going to get better each week as they have time to practice. But this week is a big question.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Arizona relies heavily on their /unslash or quote unquote number one receiver, right? It seems like they have a lot of pieces, but they constantly go to one person. And Marquise Brown's definitely been that person for them. So with him out, I mean, is it plug and play for D-Hop? Does he just go right in, take that role? Or do you start looking around into some of these other guys?
Right. And that, I think, is the bigger question now. You brought in Robbie Anderson. I don't think he plays in this game. He just came in Monday, and you got 2 days of practice. I mean, I don't think he can play much at all in this game. I'd be surprised if he's not inactive for this game, basically. And the other two guys, Rondale Moore and AJ Green, have been there and just haven't been able to do anything. Mm-hmm. And now you take away, the idea was to then have Brown and Hopkins. Now you've lost Brown, you get Hopkins back, and we don't know how many snaps he's going to play. Does that even things out for this offense and mean you're going to have 9 points against a defense you should score points against? And Obviously the Saints are a better defense than the Seahawks, who were, again, last in the league in every category pretty much. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough if you're the Cardinals. Lots of questions, lots of uncertainty.
Right. I mean, Marquise Brown, of the 6 games they've played in, 4 of them have been double-digit targets. Only one with double-digit receptions. He had 14 receptions in one game. Those versus the Rams. I mean, that's impressive. But he's been over 50 yards receiving, over 60 yards receiving since week 1. Week 1 only had 43. But, I mean, he's been a big part of the offense, when you look at it like that.
The number one guy, yeah.
But D-Hop, this is what he does, right? I think he comes in and he can get those numbers. I don't expect him to get double-digit targets to, Thursday night. But I think after the 10-day break, he'll be a big part of the game plan next week.
Yeah, I think he'll be back, more in full force of what we would expect in the next week. But it is tough to come back to a Thursday game for sure.
Right. So something to keep an eye on for sure. How about the Saints injuries, though? Very concerning. Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Marcus Lattimore, among others, are out for this game. That's the entire offense.
If you look at the offense, it's not a pretty picture, right? We still don't know who's going to play quarterback. We'll get to that in a bit here, but the big thing here is Thomas has been out for a few weeks. He was, kind of on the fence. We knew that, but Landry's out again. So 2 of your top targets on offense, and Lattimore, your number one cornerback, is out for this. So does that open things up for the offense of the Cardinals to kind of target a backup cornerback here? Although I love the Saints safeties, their cornerbacks are going to leave a lot to be desired there, maybe have some openings. And if you're the Saints offense, you're passing to your 4th and 5th wide receivers really quickly here. However, I think the Saints have ways to recover from these injuries, just like they did last week. They didn't get the W, but they hung in there with the Bengals. And how did they do that? On Alvin Kamara in the run game, right? And, short passes and efficient offense and a pass interference that wasn't called at the end of the game. I'm not bitter about that or anything, but it is what it is at this point. We do know that they can produce still with these injuries, right? They at least have an excuse, right? And I don't want to say any NFL team has an excuse because there's injuries everywhere, but they've got so many guys out, and you didn't even put on this list Andrus Peat, who is their starting guard, is out, right? So another guy on the offensive line now. Again, you're talking 5 starters on, and their tight end,
right?
Troutman is out. So, it's a long list
It's
of
a lot.
injuries for the Saints, but I still expect them to produce on offense. They have the capability of doing that. And especially if Jameis Winston is back, he can do a little more movement around that I think will help that offense produce. We talked about this on the Tuesday show, and I do think that could help. But yeah, now you put up the banner here. The bigger question is who's starting at quarterback. Jameis Winston did return, still limited, I think, in the last practice, but expected that he could play. However, they didn't announce the starter because he had his struggles, and now Andy Dalton's there,
also,
and he could play.
You only have a couple days to, as a defense for Arizona, to plan for the quarterback.
Right.
So it's good strategy not to put it out there early, right? So they're probably just waiting till the game or day of, right?
Yeah, and actually, I do think Winston starts this game. He's your you picked him as the starter at the beginning of the season for a reason, and I do think he can do a little more movement in the pocket, and do things to get this offense going and run right too, a little more than Andy Dalton can. So he's a little more of an X factor. Yes, he's more prone to mistakes than Andy Dalton.
Well, I think
in this case,
which team gives them the best chance to win? Look, the receivers are out, right? That's going to be tough. But I think they can rely on the run game, right? They're one of the top rushing teams in the league. Yeah. Kamara's healthy. They play decent defense. Got some pieces on defense for the Saints. Which quarterback in the scenario that they're in gives them the best chance to win?
Yeah, I still say Winston. I still am leaning Winston. I think that he has more big game capability than Dalton does, and that's the fact of the matter. And even when you have everybody healthy, it's one thing if you're like, oh, we're going to just let Jameis rest one more week and play Andy Dalton with everybody healthy, because he does have the capability to, get it off to the receivers. But when you're missing this many receivers and a starting guard, you want somebody who's more mobile in the pocket, period. You cannot stick Andy Dalton there. Who's a little more stagnant and let him get crushed maybe. So I just think Winston, they believe Winston's a better option. He was named the starter at the beginning of the season. So
they're not winning games. They're 2-4, right? So, what they're doing
so it's not like Dalton did any better.
They're leading the league in turnovers right now. They've had 7 fumbles lost, 6 interceptions on the season. Jameis Winston accounted for 5 of those 6 interceptions.
Yikes.
One of their wins came week 1. They won by 1 point with Jameis Winston. The other 2 were losses. He had 5 interceptions in those 2 games. Since then, they cleaned it up, but really they're 1-2 and 1-2. So, which quarterback gives them the best chance to win? That's really, I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know. We've kind of seen samples. I think the Saints got to put Jameis Winston out there just so we can close this book or reopen it, right?
Exactly.
We just don't know with him, right? He had the 30 interception season, gets injured, didn't see a lot of him. The second year comes back, and we have 5 interceptions. So it's like, is it time to close the book, or do you think the Saints can make him a franchise guy? What's it going to take for him to be a franchise guy?
I don't think of Winston as a franchise guy. I think of him as we still have a really good roster to win now, and we're not ready to get a rookie quarterback and set ourselves back a few years, right? And especially with this Saints roster, you have too many veterans that you're not ready to start over, right? And your cap situation and all of that. At some point you have to, but I think Jameis Winston gives them that 2-3 year window of like, okay, he can still carry this team. He can still lead this team and make us competitive and get us to the playoffs and, see what we do from there. If we can make a run with this team and still build around that versus, basically picking a rookie and hitting the reset button. And then you have to deal with losing some of these key players that are on this roster by the time that quarterback is hitting his prime or, really ready to go. And they're not exactly picking high in the draft anytime soon because they are a competitive team who's winning some games. So, yeah, it's kind of a tough situation. But that's why they stuck with Winston to begin with, I think.
Right. And if they lose this game, maybe they do start talking about quarterback, a top 10 pick. That's 2-5, right? That puts you pretty close. Yeah,
I think it is really a big – whoever loses this game is really putting themselves in a bad situation.
Yeah.
It is the NFC, so who knows what can happen.
Right. So that brings us to the next point here. Any playoff teams in this game? Can whoever wins will be 3-4, 1 game back from 500. Which team, A, we'll get to who wins, but which team if they do win this game and becomes 3-4, which one's more likely to turn it around and make a playoff run? Tough question.
Which team is more likely to make a playoff run?
Yes.
I'm going to go with the Saints, and I'll tell you why, right? Because Michael Thomas is going to come back eventually, right? You're going to have Alvin Kamara. These guys who are injured are going to come back. It only looks up from here if you're the Saints and you lose this game. You're only looking up and saying, okay, but we're going to get healthy, and our offense is going to click again, and Jameis Winston's back with the guys he normally would have around him, right? And obviously there could be injuries down the road, but that has to be your thinking. If you're the Cardinals, even after last week, your last gasp of breath is saying, well, we're getting DeAndre Hopkins back. We scored 9 points and allowed too many to the worst defense in the league, but we're getting DeAndre Hopkins back. So you don't really have anything to look forward to if you're the Cardinals, right? There's no saving grace here unless you think, this wide receiver who was deadpanned by his last team is now going to be your saving grace, right? And I mean, there's a lot to like about him, but I don't think he's the answer in terms of helping this offense and being the X factor and all of that. So my answer would be the Saints. I do think the Saints can still make a run, can still make the playoffs, even if they lose. The Rams, the Cardinals division is really tough right now. All three of those teams are playing well. The 49ers are dealing with injuries. Right. They're probably going to get better as the season goes on, as they get healthier. The Rams are up and down. The Seahawks obviously are exceeding expectations to this point. And you already lost to them once. It's not good if you're the Cardinals and you lose this game.
Yeah. The Cardinals, really, their offense is just not performing, and they're supposed to be an offensive team, right? I like what you said about the Saints, minus the quarterback position. There's a lot to look forward to. They have pieces, right? It's just really how far can the quarterback take them? Cardinals got bigger problems than that. They're not performing to expectations right now on both sides of the ball, and their quarterback's underperforming.
Yeah.
Right. At this point, you should be getting better each year. We can blame that on receiver if you'd like. Maybe D-Hop solves some of the problems. Unlikely one player solves a lot of the problems. But running back is going to be a problem for them moving forward, right? James Conner's hurt in this one. I think you mentioned Eno Benjamin also has an injury, right? Questionable?
I think he's back. Eno is back
now.
But
okay. But they've never really had.
He might end up being their running back one this week because Conner's questionable. And their other running back, I forget who it is out. So I think Eno could end up being the starter in this game, and they've had no run game to speak of this year, right? It's not been pretty for them. And
I think last year that was one of their strengths, is being able to run the football.
Right.
Well.
Right.
And really, there's a weird thing going on with Kyler Murray. Are they relying on him too much, or is he trying to do too much? I mean, at 100 yards rushing last week, it's just not getting it done.
Yeah, and the fumble.
He's the type of guy. He's not like a Pat Mahomes or a Josh Allen. You can throw everything on him and have him carry the team.
Certainly hasn't shown that. No.
Right. But I think he's a great player, but maybe not that caliber. Right. I think you got to find other ways to move the football with Arizona. And I just haven't seen that yet. Right. They're drive, they're only scoring on 31% of their drives. It's 24th in the league. Just not getting it done. They're 28th in the league on third down conversions at 34%.
Oh, ugly.
Some context, the Bills and Chiefs are 50% and 52.8%. Bills lead the league. Scoring percentage, the Raiders, 53%. Chiefs, 48. Bills, 46. Little context, but it's like, they're just not – their offense is not sustaining drives, and that's a major problem, especially you have an offensive-minded coach. You have a lot of weapons, as far as James Conner, Marquise Brown, who's now out, D-Hop coming back. Just haven't seen it, right?
Yeah, and the big question for me is what happens with the coach if the Cardinals lose this game and they're kind of spiraling out of control? How much longer do you hold on to Cliff Kingsbury, right? He's definitely in question here. And if he leaves, if they fire him, who becomes the next head coach, like the interim guy? I mean, their defensive coordinator is Vance Joseph. Does he become the interim coach? Is that going to help this team at all? I mean, he certainly hasn't been doing much on defense, obviously, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they would let him go too. And then it's just, a free for all. Some first year guy is going to be there.
And there's always been a question marks with college systems in the NFL. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, was he's given it a huge effort, but it does seem that the league has shifted a little, and he kind of doesn't have as many answers as he used to, right? I think they were more flashy. They were a much better offense in previous years, but something flipped. And outside looking in, it's likely that teams are figuring out how to defend it, and you have no other option to go to.
Yeah.
Right? So
exactly, and that's happened to a lot of college
Kingsbury
coaches.
Likely goes back to the college ranks and makes $10 million a year, and
yep. I'd imagine he'll be fine in his life, but the Cardinals it'll be a big step back for them, because similar to the Saints, they're kind of in win now mode. They're not in rebuild mode. They're not in we're still putting the pieces together mode. They're in we should be competing for this right now mode, and they just aren't. And when maybe a new coach, new system, new something to change it up.
Right. All right, let's get into our final segment here. Game predictions. The Saints are +2.5 at Arizona. Both teams 2-4. Over under set at 43.5. I'll let you go first. You are 6-0 on Thursday night games. So
the fate of this game seems to be in my
lieutenant to the football gods here on Thursday night. So I will let you lead so I can piggyback and we can both make money.
Well, I am actually going to go with the Saints with the points +2.5. I expect this to be a close game because both teams are playing for something, right? Their lives, 2-4. You're playing for your life at this point. Again, I think it means more to the Cardinals than the Saints, but I do think the Saints will win this game, and they're actually getting the 2.5, but I do think it'll be close. I think it'll be like a 24-20 game or 24-21, something like that. So I'm taking the Saints with the points and the over in this game. I think it'll be one of the more exciting Thursday night games. And it's good to have D-Hop back, but I don't think he's enough to get that Cardinals offense revving against the Saints. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at this point. I can't trust the Cardinals after seeing that total breakdown last week against the Seahawks.
Right. Yeah. This is a tough one. We talked, before we got on air here. This is a really tough one to pick. I'm actually going to disagree with you. I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals. I like them, at home. I think they know that they had a really bad week last week against the Seahawks, who they were expected to win. So tough for them. But I just look at the Saints and I see too many injuries, right? Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Marcus Lattimore. Kamaro's been battling injury, right? He's back healthy now, but, coming off an injury. And then this quarterback, any team with a quarterback conflict, it's a distraction. Half the locker room wants Jameis, half the locker room wants
Andy. Internally
Andy.
they know what's going on. They just haven't said it out loud.
But maybe a third of them want Tyson Hill.
Yeah.
So,
to be the quarterback.
I don't know. And it's not like any of these guys are obvious options, right? You're taking a risk with Jameis Winston with the volatility. Turnovers, touchdowns, what's it going to be? Andy Dalton, your safe option. They're just so different, right? But you haven't been winning games with either one. So I just think that's coming off a really tough loss, too. It's just demoralizing. Now you got to travel to Arizona. I like the Cardinals to bounce back. D-Hop's back, a little bit of energy. They got pieces here. Just they haven't really put it together, but I like them at home on prime time. Hopefully we can get a couple first downs in this game, unlike the last few.
Oh man, right?
Games,
punt.
Yeah,
No,
but I definitely taking the under as well at 43.5.
Okay. So you're under.
Don't think there's going to be a lot of scoring. Thursday night games are always a little sluggish.
Alvin Kamara, man, I think he's the difference maker for me. He's going to control the pace a little more, and they can pass it to him, run it to him. He might become wide receiver 1 in this game. Although Olave, we didn't really talk about Olave, but he's been filling in very nicely while Michael Thomas is out. And I can't wait to see if Winston's back with him, what kind of chemistry they have. There's a lot to look forward to in this game. It'll be a fun one.
Yeah, and something we didn't mention is the Saints third in the league in penalties. That doesn't have a huge impact.
That's right, but
definitely a factor.
Ugly. You did big third downs, things like that. You can't have penalties, and that's always a knock against your team. Coaches are always gonna, complain about that no matter what the number is. Oh, we had 5 penalties and they were huge. We had 10 penalties. It's not. You're not going to win a game like that. So yeah.
Yep. So you're taking the Saints. I mean, I should have followed suit with your record, but it's a new week. You know, you
6-0. Can I go
can't base these
7-0?
games on historical data and trends because every week's different. Every circumstance is different. So I'll go Arizona. I don't know. We'll see. That's what's fun about it. But thanks for tuning in to the Thursday night preview. Again, Anthony's 6-0. I don't think he's going to be 7-0, but we'll see. We'll say 6-1 for next week. But how can you not listen to his advice with that record, right? This far into the season. So tune in with us every Thursday for the Thursday night preview as we get you ready for the Thursday night game. And be sure to check out the NFL Sunday preview as we go through every single game. Get you ready for Sunday. And Anthony's NFL pick 6 at 57% last week. I had a decent week so far. It's 4-3 on picks. That includes the Thursday night game last week. So get
still on the winning side. You know,
best bets, right? Hey, as long as you're above 50%, you're crushing it.
And that's my second worst week, a winning week. That's not bad.
Right.
That's not
bad.
Again,
how can you not listen to the NFL pick 6 with Anthony and his 6 best bets, as well as the NFL Sunday preview, and also get your reactions on Touchback Tuesday, now live every single Monday evening at 7:30 Eastern.
That's
all we got.
And remember, toss your hat in the ring.